While running is good, running doesn't stress running doesn't stress the system nearly as much as doing higher intensity training. Now, if you told me that you're going to go out and do intervals, like today was a workout where you get warmed up and then do a series of 50-meter sprints, now you're talking about some severe disruption to homeostasis. So when I mentioned earlier that we want to train 2 or 3 heavy days a week and we want to train to get our heart rate up and be out of breath.
You're listening to the Live Life Longer show with Dan Voss, inspiring you to live longer through the cold, the hot, breathing, eating, and being nature. In this week's episode, my guest is Pete McCall. Pete is the host of the All About Fitness podcast, personal trainer, strength coach, fitness educator, and author living in Carlsbad, California. Frequently quoted as a fitness expert in publications such as The Washington Post, The Wall Street Journal, Time, Men's Fitness, Glamour, U.S. News and World Report, and many more, Pete is a sought-after resource for accurate, in-depth insight on how to get results from exercise. Besides working with individual clients and teaching group fitness classes, Pete has more than a decade of experience educating personal trainers around the world, including teaching for both the American Council on Exercise and the National Academy of Sports Medicine. Pete's personal philosophy is that fitness is having the ability to do what you want to do when you want to do it. Pete has a Master's of Science in Exercise Science and Health Promotion and a certified personal trainer with both ACE and NASM. In addition, he is a certified strength and conditioning specialist with the National Strength and Conditioning Association, as well as a fellow in applied functional science from the Gray Institute. Pete is a published author and has a new upcoming book, Ageless Intensity, which covers the science of how exercise mitigates the effects of aging. Pete, welcome to the Live Life Longer show.
Well, thanks, Dan. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be able to speak with your audience today. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I would like to get right into talking about your new book, which is something that it really has a lot to do with what I like to cover on this podcast, talking about longevity, aging gracefully. So let's start off talking a little bit more about ageless intensity and how exercise can improve the function of that physiological system that we have, which is responsible for living the most optimal healthy life. So tell us a little bit more about ageless intensity and how exercise can improve that optimal health.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's such a big topic, right? And we were talking just before, we were talking for a couple moments before we hit record. And I kind of got into this idea of really paying attention to exercise and aging when I was really young. I was a rugby player for a number of years and in Washington, D.C. And Dan, when I was a young man coming out of college, like all young men, I probably had a little bit more confidence and definitely a lot of ego than I should have. But I started playing club rugby after college, men's club rugby. And here I was, 22 years old, thinking I was fit, thinking I was in shape. And I literally got pounded on by these guys almost twice my age. They're in their late 30s, early 40s. And in the rugby world, in the rugby community, guys will play. I've played on teams with guys in their mid 40s and they're still playing against 20-year-olds. And there really is kind of an ageless wonder that people that are involved in the sport just continue to play. So 20 something years ago, I made up my mind at 22 years old that I want to be as fit as those guys when I get to be their age. And so that's what really caused me to get into training. And that was even before I got into the fitness industry. I was working in politics in DC, which we won't go into because that's a mess. But then when I got into fitness, one thing I noticed, I started teaching indoor cycling classes. And when you look at the literature, they'll tell you to say, 220 miles your heart rate. That's your max heart rate. Well, I was teaching classes with 50-year-old. I'd have 50-year-old people in my classes, which seemed really old at the time. But yeah, that was 20 something years ago. 50 years old seemed old at the time. But now I'm a year away from 50 myself. But I was doing all these heart rate calculations to try to tell people what their target heart rate should be. And I'd say, your target heart rate should be about 140, maybe 145 beats a minute. And they'd look at me and say, I barely feel like I'm working at that. These and they were pushing at maybe 155, 160 beats a minute, which the literature wasn't there. And this just kind of, so I paid attention to this. And as I went from being a personal trainer and being an instructor full time to being more of an educator, I was at the American Council on Exercise developing education programs for them. And I realized that's when I started putting the pieces together, that between hormones production, between muscle, the physiology of how muscles convert energy into the food you eat, nutrition into energy, all these different components, exercise really can help extend the lifespan. And that's when I left working full time with the American Council on Exercise, because if I had started going down that road with them there, then they would have owned the intellectual property on them. And the other thing is, I'm a Gen Xer. I am right. Gen X is about 1964, 1965 to about 1980-ish. And I was born in 1972. So I grew up BMX riding, skateboarding. I grew up with the action sports. I'm not a snowboarder, but really my generation literally created the X Games. And now, Dan, I have friends that are in their early 50s, and these are guys, we used to steal wood together. We'd go to construction sites and find wood that we'd build ramps with. And these are guys now that have, my one buddy just turned 51, and he has like a 10-foot half pipe in the backyard that he rides with his kids. And you see that in the action sports community, where now you have a whole population of guys that are jumping, riding, doing whatever in their 40s. And I started doing BMX. I started going to skate parks again here in Southern California. And if you go to any skate on my BMX bike, and if you go to any skate park before 8:30 a.m. on a weekend, you're going to see all guys with gray hairs, and it's such a cool. But you see that if you stay active, you can continue enjoying your favorite activities, and so that's what. So I kind of started going down that route, maybe a little bit about 10 years ago now, about trying to research and understand more about how exercise can promote health as we age, and really, and then I'll turn it back to you, but really because. Before, in the research literature, when they looked at populations of people in their 60s and 70s, they were studying populations of sedentary, deconditioned, relatively unhealthy people. And they would say, okay, how does 10 weeks of exercise, how does 12 weeks, how does 20 weeks of exercise affect their bodies? So the data we have on older adults and exercise is very limited. But now when you look at it, the health club industry, the health club boom is about 50 years old. Nautilus, a company I work for, I'm a contractor education consultant for Nautilus. Nautilus was created in 1970. The commercial health club boom started about the same time. Jazzercise was created in the late 60s. So you kind of had this emergence of the fitness culture about 50 years ago. So for the last 50 years, this is the first time in human history that exercise has been a very popular recreational activity. And really, you now have a population of people. If somebody started exercising when they were 25 years old in 1975, they're now 70 years old. And if they've been exercising throughout their lifespan, the literature we have right now would say, don't lift weights, don't do explosive jumps, don't do this, don't do that. But if they've been doing it all along, you can still do it. I would not have a 70-year-old start a program by doing kettlebells. But would I feel comfortable having a 70-year-old who's fit, healthy, and has been exercising for 30 or 40 years start doing kettlebells? Absolutely, 100%. And so the work I've been trying to do has been trying to get people to realize, hey, as we age, does not mean we stop being active. If anything, we want to double down on our favorite activities so we can continue doing them. Because just because you turn a certain number doesn't mean that you have to go snowboarding or skiing or whatever your favorite activity might be.
Yeah, there was something you said that stood out to me, is that if we stay active, then we get to continue to do the things that we enjoy later in life. I would say the truth is opposite. If you do things that you enjoy, you can be active your whole life. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's why that's why I kind of live by the motto, fitness is having the ability to do what you want to do when you want to do it. If you look into any dictionary definition of fitness, there's no mention of appearance. Fitness is about work capacity. It's about performance. It's about being able to do, not looking a certain way. And that's really where the industry, and I'm a 20-something year veteran of the fitness industry, the industry has failed consumers by focusing on appearance as opposed to longevity and as opposed to performance and feeling a certain way. And that's where, personally, that's what I try to get trainers to think about is let's focus on how our clients feel and not necessarily on how our clients look. And when you start doing that, you start seeing just these amazing results.
Yeah. So for people that are active, obviously each person has different goals for whatever that may be, but how important is it, or is it important at all, to diversify your type of exercise? So if you're somebody that likes to run, and let's say your goal is to complete your first marathon or finish in a certain time, how important is it for them to also do weight training or incorporate, yoga?
Well, my question would be to somebody is if they're running, like say in their 50s. Now, do you want to run to get in shape? Is that your preferred way to run, preferred way to exercise? Meaning, do you love listening to a podcast and just going for a 40-minute run along the lake? Knowing you're in Chicago, and is that if that's your form of exercise, that's great. But do you want to be in shape to run, or do you want to run to get in shape? Because people should be looking at doing different components of fitness. Now, that doesn't mean changing your workout program week to week or month to month. But what it means is you need to do some mobility. And mobility is being able to move the body. Yoga would be a great, people should be doing about 1 or 2 yoga classes a week or 1 or 2 just body weight workouts a week where all they're doing is moving their body through space. Animal flow is another popular form of just body weight movement. So we should be doing about 2 of those workouts a week. We should be doing 2, maybe 3 strength training workouts a week where we're using external resistance. You could use barbells, machines, I don't care what you use, but 2 or 3 times a week we should be lifting heavy stuff. And then 2 or 3 times a week, or 1 to 3 times a week, we should be getting our heart rate up, and we should be getting to the point of where we're out of breath. And so we really need to look at all those components. And the funny thing is, on my podcast, when I interview different researchers, when I interview different professionals, they all kind of come up with that same model. Where 2 days a week we should be doing some mobility training, just body weight. 2 or 3 days a week we should be lifting heavy. 2 or 3 days a week we should be getting out of breath. And that really is, so it's not just me saying that. There's a large body of literature out there suggesting that our body needs all that. So if you're a runner, to get to your question, if you're a runner, you should add weight training at least 2 days a week. If you're somebody that loves weight training, I'm sorry, but you have to leave the gym. You have to leave the free weight area and go. Yeah. You don't need to go for a run, but you need to do something that gets your heart rate up and gets you breathing hard 2 or 3 days a week. So a well-rounded fitness program includes all those components.
Yeah, that's good to know. I would say I've had throughout my years of being active, I usually am in like a certain type of exercise, right? Like I'm just training for a marathon, I'm just running, or back in high school and college, I was just weight training for the football season. And now that I'm older, I'm incorporating more things into my lifestyle. I'm going out for longer walks. I'm doing more like band resistance training as of late. I'm trying to get more yoga into my practice. So I'm happy to hear that I'm doing all the right things to have more of a well-rounded fitness lifestyle.
Well, it's funny real quick, because if you'd asked a younger version of myself 25 years ago, I would have been, and I know I was all bench press all the time, all heavy weights. And now, man, I don't think I've done a barbell bench press in I don't know how long, because it's not good for your shoulders. And I would much rather be able to do an inversion. I'd much rather be able to do an inversion in yoga. I'd much rather be able to hold certain yoga poses than to lift a ton of weight, because you feel, there's a reason why yoga has been around for thousands of years. You use your body the way it was designed to move, moving in all directions, moving in all planes of motion. Having studied biomechanics, when I started taking yoga classes, I'm like, man, this just feels right. And I have a lot. The cool thing about yoga is I have a long way to go to get better. And the hard part is I've done a few virtual yoga classes, but I prefer doing it live in a studio than trying to do it at home virtually. But yeah, no, it's one of those things, especially as I mature, I definitely enjoy trying to add more yoga into my programming.
Yeah, well, I know we're going to be talking a little bit more throughout our conversation about, obviously, with your book topic of how how exercise can relate to aging well. But something like yoga, I would imagine, is really good for you, especially as you get later on in life. Is that correct?
Yeah, because when you look at it, so exercise, like high intensity exercise and exercise works, you have two different components of your nervous system. You have your sympathetic nervous system and you have your parasympathetic nervous system. Strength training, explosive training, running, that works on your sympathetic nervous system. And that's your fight or flight nervous system. That's what produces the epinephrine. When you first start exercising and your heart rate starts coming up and you start feeling that little burst of energy, that's epinephrine, which is commonly called adrenaline, and that's cortisol that releases. Those are hormones which release energy into the muscles that make energy available for muscles.
Got it.
Your parasympathetic nervous system is called your rest and digest system, because that's what kind of controls all the natural functions or all the normal biological functions of the body. And we can't do exercise that's all sympathetic without any parasympathetic activity. So stuff like yoga, like meditation, can help increase what's known as parasympathetic tone, so that way there's a balance in the body and really help restore kind of that. Think of if an alarm goes off and you need to go running out of the building, that's your sympathetic nervous system. When you're laying in bed at night and you're trying to downregulate and go to sleep, that's your parasympathetic nervous system. And you can't be all one versus the other. There needs to be a balance of the programming.
Yeah, interesting. You've written an article for ACE that I was able to read about the best exercise for each decade of life. Do you want to maybe touch a little bit further on why it's important to have, each decade of your life to have a certain type of exercise? And if you care to elaborate for each decade, you don't necessarily have to touch on each decade, but if you want to go through some of the main ones, what are the best exercise types for each decade of lifespan?
Well, no, that's thank you for taking the time to read that. And I kind of incorporated that. I wrote an ebook on exercise programming for the Fountain of Youth, and I kind of expand that out a little bit. But if you look at it, really, if you look at kind of your lifespan over the course of decades, and first I want to make this observation that, going back when I was doing the research for my book, Ageless Intensity, more than 120 years ago, in the late 1890s, the average human lifespan, Dan, in the United States was somewhere around the late 40s. Meaning that I'd be coming up on the end of my expected lifespan right about now. So in the last 120 years, since the 1890s, through public health, through vaccinations, hint, hint, through public health, through vaccinations, through washing our hands, through all these different things that we've implemented from a public health standpoint, we've managed to almost double the lifespan. The average lifespan, I think, for the American adult is somewhere in the mid-70s for both men and women. Women, for some reason, seem to live 1 or 2 years longer than men. Who knows? They probably want to enjoy life for a year or two after their significant other is gone. But when you look at it, when you look at that, we've been able to manipulate our lifespan in a number of different ways. And so when it comes to exercise, that's what exercise allows us to do. Exercise allows us to extend our lifespan. So if we go back, and what I try to do in that piece on decade by decade is what is critical, essential for people in their 20s. If you're in your 20s and you're listening to this right now, the most important thing right now is for exercise to be a regular habit. Like, I don't frankly care if somebody's in their 20s. I don't really care what you're doing. Just play around and do the different activities. Find what you enjoy, but just do something every day. And then when you get to your 30s, and this is, I'm 48 going on 49. In your 30s, you're getting into your career. You're focused more on it. Maybe you're having a family. So you're going to have a lot more demands for your time in your 30s. But if you already have that habit of going to a studio or going to a gym or working out at home, if you establish that habit in your 20s, then by the time you get to your 30s, life's going to get busier. You're going to have more demands on your time, but it's an ingrained habit, like brushing your teeth. I don't think anybody listening to this would ever imagine going to bed without brushing their teeth, because it's a habit that we do. And if you establish that healthy habit of daily activity, and it just doesn't need to be exercise. You alluded earlier to walking. If we go for a long walk, that can be a great workout. If we do something to get our heart rate up for at least 20 minutes a day, it doesn't have to be slam your face into the wall, high intensity.
Right.
You just need to get your heart rate up and breathe quicker than normal for about 20 minutes a day to be beneficial. Then when you get to your 30s and 40s and life starts getting busier, you have that as a habit. I mean, there have been times I travel internationally, or I did travel internationally, and there have been times where, I wouldn't be able to get to a gym or a workout, but I would walk out in the hotel. I'd walk up maybe 4 or 5 flights of stairs to get to my hotel room, or in an airport. You can always tell the CrossFitters in an airport, because the CrossFitters have their roll-on their shoulder and are walking up the stairs in between the B and the C concourse at Chicago at O'Hare. We have the bags on our shoulders and we're walking the stairs while everybody else is taking the escalator. So when you get into your 30s and 40s, you are consistent with it, and really as you get into your 40s and 50s, that's when strength training should become an integral part of your exercise. Because for men, strength training can maintain and elevate testosterone levels. For women, strength training can promote levels of muscle mass, which help elevate metabolism as they get older. Because here's the thing, type 2 diabetes is a major issue throughout aging. Type 2 diabetes means your body cannot process the carbohydrate that you take in through your diet. Well, walking is a great form of exercise, but walking uses type 1 muscle fibers. So if you're walking every day, if you're doing some low intensity activity every day, yeah, you're getting exercise, so you're being healthy. But if you're not using the type 2 muscle fibers, it's a type 2 muscle fibers responsible for carbohydrate metabolism. So that's where strength training becomes key for helping delay onset diabetes or reducing the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, especially in the 40s and 50s. And then we get to our 50s and 60s, and I'm not quite there yet, but strength training becomes a way for men to, the research on men in their 60s and 70s shows that if you do strength training in your 60s and 70s, you elevate testosterone levels, right? And that's a big issue for, that's a big issue we can touch on a little bit later. Sure. But when we look at strength training helps men maintain testosterone levels. Women don't need to worry about it as much because testosterone is made primarily in the testes, hence the name. Testosterone is an androgen, a male sex hormone. Women will produce more growth hormone, human growth hormone, and insulin-like growth factors as a result of strength training. Now, growth hormone helps develop new muscle tissue, but growth hormone helps the skin look younger, it helps the hair be healthier, and it helps metabolize fat more efficiently. So as we get into our 40s and 50s, strength training 2 or 3 days a week of just lifting heavy stuff should become a foundational component of our exercise program. And then when we get into our 60s and 70s, the same thing. But all the way up until then, I would really advocate using all types of equipment. But by the time we get into our 60s and 70s, like I said, I work with Nautilus. I'm a big fan of using Nautilus machines because you can push the resistance without having to worry about balance, without having to worry about motor control, and you can get the muscles will stay strong. So by the time we get to our 70s and 80s, we should still be doing strength training. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, rest her soul, was doing strength training up until her later years of life. And she really credited that with helping her maintain that longevity. And when you look at like the blue zones around the world of people who live to be the longest, they are active every single day. It really is. And so as we get older, decade by decade, we can scale the different activities, but we should just maintain those activities levels up so we can enjoy every decade to the fullest.
Yep, exactly. What would you say to someone that looks at aging and fitness, maybe in a different way, where they think that as you get older, it's just inevitable that you're going to get out of shape and your body's not going to look as good as it was when you were 20 or 30, and that's just the way it is? What would you say to somebody that thinks that there's no reason to be working out or there's no hope? It's just that's how we age and that's just part of life.
I can't change that mindset, right? I mean, if people look at it and say, well, I'm going to get old, I might as well let it happen. The exact thing is opposite, man. I mean, there's something out here I call California young. I can go to the gym I work out in Encinitas. For the last few months, we've been doing outdoor operations. We had to move they moved all the equipment outside. And you can see guys that are in their 60s that were former Marines. We have a lot of retired Marines out here because of Camp Pendleton. These are guys in their 60s, 70s are still doing pull-ups in the gym. These are guys that are still doing push-ups. These are guys that still go out and do their PT because it's just part of their DNA. It's who they are. And really the message that I have for people is if you get over a certain age, I get it. We don't, look, I got divorced about not quite 2 years ago, but I was driving a minivan with 2 kids, man. The last thing I need to worry about at my stage in life is six-pack abs. I shouldn't be worried about doing half-naked selfies on Instagram. In my 40s, I use exercise as the means to control aging and to be able to maintain the ability to play with my kids. I didn't have kids until I was 40 years old. My kids were born when I was 40 and 42. And I go to school functions now. Whose grandkid are you here? Whose grandpa? I'm like, no. I'm here for my kid. I don't look that old. But in reality, you see that. And I would say to people, what you can do. Aging is going to happen. We cannot stop time. That's chronological aging. But what we can do, and what I try to write about, is manipulate biological aging. Biological aging is how the physiology changes over time. And the analogy I use in my book, Dan, is a car, is look at an automobile, right? If you had a 1964, Chevy Corvette, that's a pretty bitchin' car. If you take care of that car, if you change the oil, if you get it serviced regularly, if you tune up the engine on a regular basis, that 1964 Vet is still humming and purring. And you can still ride around and really enjoy that sucker. But if you had a 64 Vet and you let it sit in the backyard and you didn't do anything with it, the engine oil would drain out, the tires would rot, the belts would rot, the engine would rust. And that thing can't go anywhere. Well, your body's the same way. If you sit around and don't use your muscles, if you sit around and don't breathe hard, if you sit around and don't stress your heart rate, then guess what? That's like leaving a car in your backyard, and just over time it's going to deteriorate. And then when you do try to do something hard, like you're in Chicago, if you don't do any regular exercise, and then all of a sudden you get a 12-inch snowstorm and you go out to try to shovel your driveway, what's going to happen? Your heart's not conditioned to it, and bang, you're going to have a heart attack. Or heaven forbid, you work in a 30-story office building and you're on the 20-something floor and you have to get out for a fire alarm going off. Well, if you don't have the fitness to walk down 20 stairs, one of the biggest issues about some urban firefighters in urban fire departments is when they show up are people having heart attacks as a result of the stressful situation. So it really is. Exercise really gives you the means to control how you age. We can't stop aging, but what we can do is we can control how we age.
Hey guys, I want to take a quick second to tell you about Kion, which provides natural supplements and clean coffee for vibrant health. Kion coffee is in the top 3% of all coffee grown worldwide that can claim to be specialty grade, which means it's free from yeast, pesticides, mold, and mycotoxins. It's also one of the best cups of coffee I've ever had. Kion also has a really great aminos product that aids in better sleep, post-exercise recovery, provides fast, clean energy, supports fasting, and improves cognitive performance. Experience the energy and performance benefits of Kion Aminos today. To get 15% off your order of Kion coffee or any of their products and supplements, visit getkion.com/danvoss and enter code DANVOSS, that's DANVOSS, at checkout for 15% off your order. I think so much of it comes down to mindset, and the earlier you can get that mindset right, the better. For someone like myself, I'm 29, and for me, it's like just making that decision that for the rest of my life, I'm going to be fit, I'm going to look good, I'm going to feel good, and there's just no excuse for it to be anything other than that.
Now, if I can cut in real quick, but that's what I mean. You have that habit. So if you have that mindset of like, I enjoy exercise, it makes me feel better, I know that I function better with exercise, then when life gets busy, when you get working and you slammed with like appointments, you know that you can take 15 minutes, whatever. If you had a break at a wedding, you told me you're a wedding photographer, then you can take a lap around. You could probably take a lap around and do a walk, or you could probably drop and do 2 sets of push. It's having that sort of mindset to know that there are going to be days when my schedule might get a hold of me. It might make it difficult for me to exercise, but at least you can find times to. The research shows, ACSM, the American College of Sports Medicine, called it exercise light, that if you do 10 minutes of activity in the morning, that's a walk around the block in the morning. You do 10 minutes of activity at noontime. If you do 10 minutes of activity in the evening, and you could 3 10-minute walks, that's enough exercise or enough physical activity to promote health. Are you going to get swole and buff? No. But are you doing something to keep your car from rusting in the backyard? Absolutely. And it's just having that mindset that when life gets busy, you have that idea about, I can do something that can make a difference.
Yep. Well, and to that point, you mentioned, being at an airport and just, you're taking the stairs instead of the escalator, and you're carrying your luggage instead of rolling it. I like to do that as well. I also like to just incorporate movement or exercise throughout my whole day. So one example I like to use, and this is more of a productivity hack, as I'm working, it's called the Pomodoro method. You probably have heard of it, or may have heard of the concept. You set a timer for, in this case, it's 33 minutes where you're sitting there and you're working, whether that's answering emails, editing, whatever project you're working on. You're working for 33 minutes, and then you take a 6 or 7 minute break. And I'm very intentional about that break time. That's for me to go use the washroom, fill up my water, and then I'll also make sure I will do 10 push-ups or do 30 jumping jacks. And I'm doing that every single hour, every single half hour throughout the whole day. Rather than just making it a chore or, I got to go to the gym for 1 hour, which is great. I guess I would look at that as icing on the cake. But for me, it's getting that movement and getting that exercise in throughout the day.
And that's so key is to be active. And that's one of the things. I wear an Apple Watch, but you have Garmin, Fitbit, you have all these companies that trackers. I think one of the biggest benefits of trackers is sending that little timer to remind you to stand up and move around. Because, and there's actually, and I hate to tell people this, I hate to tell your listeners this, but there's actually research that shows that if you do an hour workout in the morning, and then you sit at your desk for 8 or 9 hours in a day, you're kind of counteracting. You're kind of like, you hit a negative balance, so that workout may not be nearly as effective as it was. And there's something called NEAT. NEAT is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So exercise is a planned activity. And what you're describing, Dan, is you're describing NEAT. Going to the gym is a planned activity. Going for a run is a planned activity. Playing a pickup basketball, those are all planned. Those are all exercise. But what you can do, and the research shows that you can burn an additional 300 calories a day by doing those things. What you're describing, you have a set of stairs behind you. Maybe on one of your breaks, you go up and down the stairs 2 times, or maybe while you're working, you go use the restroom upstairs instead of the restroom on your floor. And I always would joke with clients, it's like, hey, when you go out for coffee, don't go to the Starbucks in your building. Go to the Starbucks down the block. You might take an extra few minutes, but grab a colleague and have a walking meeting on the way. Little things like that, can add up. I mean, and I'm one of these nutheads. I park away from the entrance of a store. If I go to a Target or if I go to and that doesn't sound like much, but if I park all the way in the back of a parking lot, 2 things are going to happen. 1, I'm walking for about 4 or 5 minutes to get to the store. 2, it's a lot easier for me to get out of the parking lot and I don't have to navigate. But it's just having that mindset of where can I fit activity into my day? Where can we fit activity into the day? Because it's about just being active. It's about doing something better than nothing. And I've said that for years. I've been a media spokesperson, as you mentioned in the beginning, and thank you for that. I've been a media spokesperson for the American Council on Exercise, and it comes down to this: a little bit of something is better than a lot of nothing, and especially when it comes just to longevity and long-term health.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, even, in terms of sedentary life, standing, it looks like you may be standing there. I like to do all of my podcast recordings standing because it's, I might do 2 or 3 each week of the recordings. It's an hour each, and that's 2 or 3 extra hours of standing versus sitting. So it's little things like that.
Oh, it totally is. I interviewed Dr. Anthony Balduzzi recently with the Fit Father Project, and we both commented that we're both standing during the interview. Yeah. And I couldn't tell whether or not you were or not. I kind of tend to shift around a little bit, especially when I speak.
I'm leaning.
Yeah. But again, it's like the tables I have at my place, I have the bar top tables so I can turn my table into a standing desk. I can, and I have the same thing out on my patio. And so it's kind of having that mindset. It's like, if I need a table, why would I get a table that forces me to sit the entire time? I want a table where I can stand up and do a little, make it into a working desk. And that just is a matter of making those conscious decisions, especially if people are doing an in-home in-home workplace, now shifting that. We have to look for ways because we used to be in the office that you go to the office, you go talk to your colleague, go down the hall, you run down, like I said earlier, go get coffee. You're a little bit more active, but working from home, it can be a little bit more challenging to try to fit that activity in. But it's just having that right mindset and it'll happen.
Right, exactly. You've mentioned hormones a few times in our conversation so far. Let's talk more about hormones like, anabolic steroids and peptides and how they relate to aging.
Well, nobody walks into the gym on a Monday and say, today's my hormone day. Today I'm training the hormone system, right? I mean, nobody does that. Monday's International Chest Day. That's just any gym you go into around the world. And dudes, you have a line of guys waiting to do bench press. But when you look at what hormones are the chemicals that control all cellular reactions in our body. You have some hormones are anabolic. You mentioned anabolic steroids, and some people might hear that and think that's what professional athletes take. And I do a talk for personal trainers called Training the Endocrine System. And at the beginning of the talk, I asked people to raise their hand. How many people have anabolic steroids in their body right now? And some people look around and go, I would never do it. But the fact is, we all have anabolic steroids. Testosterone is an anabolic steroid. A steroid just means there's an interaction with the nucleus of the cell, because you have 2 components. You have the hormone and you have the hormone receptor. And so the hormone is looking around for cells with the hormone receptor. And when the hormone finds the hormone receptors, that's when they function. And peptide hormones are hormones that work on the cell membrane. So growth hormone and insulin-like growth factors are their peptides, where testosterone is a steroid. And what we do, so when we stress the body, we disrupt homeostasis. Homeostasis is our state of being at rest right now. You're standing, I'm standing, we're having a conversation. We're at relative homeostasis right now. If you were to go out and start running, if you're going to go out for a 5-mile run, where you can disrupt homeostasis, but you're going to do it at a steady pace. If I go say I'm doing a kettlebell workout, which I'll probably do this afternoon. If I'm doing a kettlebell workout, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have periods of 30 seconds of really high intensity where I disrupt homeostasis, and periods of about 30 seconds to let the muscle cells, let the muscle cells do their job to get rid of the metabolic byproduct and do more work. And really what you're doing when you look at that is the disruption to homeostasis. If you disrupt it one way for running, you're going to create a certain response for the body to repair itself. If you disrupt the homeostasis through high intensity training, you're going to stimulate a different response. The research shows that the higher intensity training, like strength training, like power training, will produce more of the hormones like growth hormone, insulin-like growth factor, and testosterone, which help us grow muscle and maintain lean muscle well into our later years. So again, while running is good, running doesn't stress the system nearly as much as doing higher intensity training. Now, if you told me that you're going to go out and do intervals, like today was a workout where you get warmed up and then do a series of 50-meter sprints, now you're talking about some severe disruption to homeostasis. So when I mentioned earlier that we want to train 2 or 3 heavy days a week and we want to train to get our heart rate up and be out of breath, the whole idea is we're trying to disrupt homeostasis to stimulate the production of these hormones, and the hormones are what help us really stay young. I mean, you can go down the street from me here in La Jolla, California, or over in Boca Raton. If you're going to go to a quote unquote anti-aging clinic, you're going to have doctors give you injections of human growth hormone, right? And so I ask people sometimes, it's like, hey, would you rather go fly somewhere or go see a specialist that's going to cost you thousands of dollars and get a GH injection, which is great, but then your body doesn't learn how to produce it on its own. Then you're stuck. Then you become an addict to your doctor going for that GH injection every few months. Instead, if you work out hard 2 or 3 times a week, your body's going to elevate that GH level, the GH levels naturally. And there's really cool research that shows that it goes well into our later years, that we can increase production of these hormones in our 60s and 70s. And that's the fascinating thing, right?
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure you just answered my question here, but I want to make sure I have this right. So by doing high intensity interval training or high intensity exercise, that is, maintaining our hormones and increasing the production of our hormones, which helps us age better, right? Is that why it's better or a good thing to be doing high intensity training, especially as we get older?
Yeah, that's kind of what I realized years ago. There are a couple of different researchers that have been looking at this. He's out of Iceland, so I might not pronounce his name correctly, but Hakkinen, it's like Hakkjen. Hakkinen has done a lot of work on this field, and then Norman Lazarus out of the UK, United Kingdom, has done a lot of research where they've been studying masters athletes. And when you look at masters athletes, people that are doing competitive weightlifting, they're doing competitive sports in their 60s and 70s, and what they see is that they have higher levels. Number one, they have higher levels of these anabolic hormones, and number two, when you look at the muscle cells have the same physiology as muscle cells years younger, meaning they can do carbohydrate metabolism much more efficiently. So that's really where the stress comes in to stress the system. Is if you're training hard, that's like keeping your 1964 Corvette in tune the entire time. You're just like taking, every time you stress the heart rate doing a workout, you're taking the engine in for a tune-up. You're running it a little bit. Because that's what they say about cars, right? If you have a car, you need to drive it a little bit in order for it to operate most effectively. You can't just leave a car sitting there for months and expect it to be able to handle when it goes out on the road. Same exact thing for the body.
Yeah. I was just going to ask about the idea of rest and recovery. What's the importance there, just in general, the importance of rest and recovery, and what are some good strategies that you like to give for recovery?
Well, we don't need. I'm not a huge Tom Brady fan by any stretch of the imagination. Whatever. When I lived in Boston, I was not a fan of New England Patriots. You either love the Patriots or you don't. But if you want evidence that recovery works, just look at Brady. Winning a Super Bowl at 43 years old, his program is built around recovery. And this is what, if you want to understand fitness, the best sports scientists in the world were the Soviets. And here's the thing: whether you were an athlete, whether you were a farmer, whether you were a soldier, whether you were a dancer, whatever you did, you belonged to the Soviet state. So going back into the 50s and 60s, the Soviets really researched human physiology and human performance. And what they realized, and this is where we got steroids from. Now keep in mind, because the Soviets realized that training, high intensity exercise, will elevate testosterone in the recovery process and when muscles repair themselves. So what did the Soviets start doing? Well, they started giving their athletes extra testosterone. Let's give you some supplemental testosterone so you recover quicker. So when you use an androgen, and those are called exogenous. If the body produces, it's endogenous. It comes from the body. If I'm injecting a steroid into my body or injecting hormones into my body, that's exogenous. And so what the Soviets realized is that by adding exogenous hormones, they can shorten the recovery time and allow their athletes to train at a higher volume. So where does that bring us for recovery? Well, recovery, if we disrupt homeostasis through exercise, if exercise disrupts homeostasis, how we sleep, what we do after the workout will determine how our body recovers. And that's one thing that I try to remember when I'm teaching fitness classes. It's like, hey, tomorrow's workout starts right now. So if we're done with a workout session, like right now, the mindset has to be, my workout tomorrow starts right now. I have to hydrate, I have to fuel, I have to get a good night's sleep, and I have to maybe do a little bit of tissue work, like with a foam roller or a stick or one of those new massage guns, in order to let my body to heal and repair. Because you disrupt homeostasis with exercise, but it's that repair process, it's that repair cycle that really helps the body stay fit and maintain activity well into the later years. And especially as we get older, I mean, the body will produce testosterone and growth hormone during stage 3 and deep REM, during stage 3 REM, or stage 3 of sleep and during deep REM. That's when the body's producing the hormones that repairs the tissues. And the other thing I've started doing is if I'm working with people like on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, I've started asking about your evening plans. It hasn't been as much of a factor the last year, but there's a huge difference. Whereas if you're taking a Friday class with me or doing a Friday workout, and you're saying, yeah, buddy of mine, we're going out to a party, we're doing this, we're doing that. What I'm going to tell you, Dan, is today's not going to be your hardest training day. I want you to take it easy in class today. Don't push yourself. You're like, dude, why not? I want to trash. Like, no. If you're going to go out and you're going to have an extra cocktail or two at night, if you're going to stay out later than normal, God bless, go enjoy. But your sleep is going to be disrupted, so you're not going to recover quicker. And if I allow you to train hard when I know your recovery is going to be affected, that's basically malpractice on my part as a coach or as a trainer. But if you tell me, if I say, hey, what's going on today? How's it going? What are your plans for tonight? Oh, no, I don't really have any plans. We're just going to order Chinese food, hang out, and watch something on Netflix. I'm going to kick your butt a little bit, because I know that you'll probably be getting to bed. I want you going to bed a half hour earlier. I want you going to bed at 10:30 instead of 11. Whereas if on the other side, you're going out with your friends, you're celebrating something, you have tickets to something, go out, have fun, but realize that should not be your hardest training day, because you won't be able to recover properly from the exercise you do.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, I'm getting more into the idea of having a more consistent schedule, specifically with my sleep, and making sure, I'm going to bed at a consistent schedule, same time every night, waking up at the same time every morning. It makes a big difference in my mental clarity, my energy, my ability to make good decisions, and then also the motivation to actually do a workout. And again, to your point, go have fun. If this past weekend I was out with some buddies, so it's not like I'm saying not to ever go out, but it is really important to look at those decisions that we make, the lifestyle that we might have weekends compared to weekdays, how it can affect things like our sleep and our exercise.
Well, and I'll say, I haven't drank. I stopped drinking a number of years ago. I was a bartender and a rugby player in an earlier life. So let's just say I used to enjoy my cocktails. I used to enjoy them maybe a little bit too much, but I stopped drinking. But what I realized, though, was in my 30s, hangovers were a lot worse at 34, 35 than they were at 24, 25. I haven't had a hangover in a number of years now, going back more than 12 years. So I would have no idea. I could not imagine being 48, 49 years old and having a few cocktails and trying to wake up the next morning and just what that would feel like. Again, it's not to say that if people do that, there's nothing wrong with going out and being, having an extra drink or two on a night. But it's a matter of just understanding that your body, that's stress on the body. How we stress, we have exercise stress, we have home life stress, we have work stress, we have all this extra stress, and a night out drinking is an additional stressor on the body. And that at some point you need to balance out your stressors. And if you have a friend coming to town, if you have tickets to a show, by all means, go out and enjoy it. You want to have an extra cocktail or two? And living here in California, one of the things too I've been talking about and trying to get the fitness industry to be more aware of too is cannabis and marijuana. Because now in a number of states, I forget how many it is now, but marijuana is now a legal recreational drug in a number of states. And there are people that I do know, a lot of people my age, Dan, who are drinking less and less, but they might be doing an edible at night, or they might be having a little bit of cannabis at night. And again, I'm not going to tell anybody not to do it. Just understand, how is that going to affect your body's ability to exercise? We always have to look at that. No matter what you want to do, if you want to have smoke a bowl instead of have a glass of wine, go for it. If it's illegal in your state, you have repercussions to deal with that. But it's a matter of understanding that is that going to disrupt my ability to train, or is it going to disrupt my homeostasis? And the interesting thing is there actually been some strains of cannabis that they've been looking at endurance athletes that do ultra marathons, athletes that will go out and do these ultra endurance races will actually use some strains of cannabis which have higher CBD and lower THC to help deal with the pain and deal with the discomfort of the longer term thing. But I always look at that is there's nothing wrong with anything that you want to do. If you want it, whatever you want to do, just understand that it's gonna affect your body's response to exercise. Because if it's a stressor on your body, it's going to alter or change how your body adapts to exercise. So you can decide if you want to do it, great. If you don't want to do it, you can probably up your exercise volume a little bit.
Yeah, super interesting. Definitely stuff to take into account as it relates to our lifestyle and how we exercise.
Now,
what else?
Has cannabis, I forget whether or not, because I know like in the last election, I know a number of different states. Did Illinois make it legal?
It is. Yeah, okay. I think that's been at least a year now. Maybe we're coming on 2 years.
Okay.
And that is an interesting topic. You were talking about how, endurance athletes might use cannabis in certain forms to improve their performance. Is that something that would be recommended? I'm not saying that you necessarily recommend it, but in general, have there been times where people recommend that for recovery or actually for like during performance?
Well, that's the interesting thing, because there are some gummies out there that might have low THC and high CBD, or have no THC. Now, THC is tetra whatever cannabinoid, and that's the psychoactive component of cannabis. CBD is a different cannabinoid that affects more of the pain. Here's the thing, and I wrote an article on this a couple of years ago, so I kind of dug into the research literature on it. We have all of our bodies, just like our bodies produce anabolic steroids, all of our bodies have cannabinoid receptors. We have a cannabinoid system in our body. So when we ingest marijuana, if we have a high THC content, it's going to react with different receptors. If it has a high CBD content, it's going to react with different receptors. That's why the next, and I'm going to go back to the NFL, and I fully recognize that majority of people listening to this podcast are not going to be NFL athletes. But I always look at, for years, I've always looked at the athletic training as if professional athletes do it for their training to perform and compete at the highest level of their sport, we can probably learn something from them. And in pro sports, a lot of times they'll give these guys opioids, they'll give these guys Vicodin, they'll dope these guys up on freaking almost like heroin to kill the pain. That's why the new collective bargaining agreement, the NFLPA, the NBAPA, all the players associations want cannabis. They do not want to be tested for cannabis because it helps promote sleep. And I did this when I was playing rugby in my youth. I would also smoke weed, the social, but also it would help reduce the pain. It allowed me to sleep better, allowed me to go to sleep better. And it's one of those things about, if you use it responsibly, like anything else in life, if you use it responsibly, it could help you. But there's a line there. And if you use it irresponsibly or using it at the wrong time, it's not going to add any value to your life. And so my recommendation is, as cannabis becomes more legal around the country, there's going to be a lot more information about its benefits. But I look at it is, if somebody wants to take a gummy, a 5 milligram gummy at night because it helps them sleep better, by all means, just be aware there's a difference. Just like a glass of wine, there's a difference between having a glass of wine and drinking the whole bottle.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit of something that can always help you, but too much of it, like having one piece of dark chocolate, could have a benefit. Having the whole bag, I don't know. I want to think twice about that one.
It's so true. I do believe, and I think some of that, the mindset there is starting to shift a little bit across the nation. But I think there's a lot of misconception around marijuana that like everyone that consumes it is just getting baked out of their mind. And some people do, but that's not always the case. It's just like anything else. You use it in the right amounts and smart amounts. It can be used to your benefit. Like I personally enjoy cannabis every once in a while. That actually helps mitigate some of my drinking, where I'm not drinking as much as I was when I was in my early 20s. And it sure as heck helps with hangovers the next day. I definitely am feeling a lot better than when I would have, way too many drinks. And if I have a gummy, it definitely mitigates some of that drinking. So I personally enjoy it from time to time.
And I think, and again, everybody makes their own personal decision, but it's been, and my undergrad, just so you understand, my undergraduate degree was actually in politics. So I studied government. And like I said, I worked in government for a little bit before I realized I enjoyed my part-time job at the gym a lot more than I enjoyed my full-time job doing government policy. And that's when I made the transition in the late 90s. But what's been fascinating about this, and then we can move on to a different topic, what's been fascinating about this cannabis issue is that it's states' rights versus federal rights. Right. And that was, and I'm not trying to equivocate it with other things that have happened in our history, the past, but you've always had this battle about certain states saying, well, we want states' rights. We want to be able to, create our own laws. And then you have the federal government saying, oh, no, we're the federal government. We tell you what to do. And cannabis, to me, Dan, has been the perfect states' rights versus federal rights argument, because if the states passed when Colorado made it legal back in whatever it was, 2014. And I remember when California first passed medical marijuana, which was a joke. You could go in almost any doctor's office and get a medical card. But that became a huge states' rights versus federal rights issue. And I firmly believe that in the next 2 to 4 years, we will see it change. We will see it decriminalized on the national level, because they're realizing that, you know what, in the states that are passing it, the world's not falling apart. We can tax it. I mean, here in California, we can tax it. I'm sure. I mean, it becomes a source of tax revenue. And you can probably still buy weed illegally. Again, I'm not into that anymore. You can probably still buy weed illegally. But I know if you go to a collective and you buy it at a collective here, you're getting a certain quality and you're paying taxes on it. Why the heck wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't? And just like anything else, I mean, we tax alcohol, we tax cigarettes. Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't? Now, I will say this as a disclaimer: I am invested in a few cannabis industry stocks because when I was in my 20s and I was in my mid 20s in the late 90s during the .com boom. I didn't have two nickels together to invest. And I look at the cannabis industry now,
it's big right now,
as the .com industry was 20 years ago. And that's one of the reasons why I've been doing so much research on it, is I see it as a huge investment opportunity.
Absolutely. I would agree with that 100%. Very cool. So what else on your new book that maybe we haven't covered, especially as it relates to aging well, and exercise, that maybe we haven't covered, you'd like to touch on a little further?
Well, there's something that, thank you. There's something that a lot of people may know this term as muscle confusion. And I think that the Beachbodies did a great job of introducing that concept, right? P90X, Tony Horton. And keep in mind, Tony Horton is now in his early 60s. So if you see videos of Tony Horton now, he's aged really well as part of his result of doing P90X. So muscle confusion is a marketing term, but it's based on something called nonlinear periodization. So nonlinear periodization, in a normal periodization cycle, you said you're a marathoner. A linear periodization is where you go from running 6 miles to 7 miles to 8 miles. You build up your volume gradually over time, and then you taper, and then you do your run. That's a linear periodization model. Nonlinear periodization means that within the course of a week, I might do 2 high-intensity workouts, I might do two moderate-intensity workouts, and I might do two not that hard, 2 low-intensity workouts. But the fact is, we're exercising every day. So nonlinear, I write in the book, I go into nonlinear periodization, and I put the model out there that's what we want to do based on the research. And I said this earlier. So based on the research, we want to lift something heavy 2 or 3 days a week. We want to get out of breath 2 or 3 days a week, and we want to do something relatively easy 1 or 2 days a week. And that's the nonlinear. You can do the same movement patterns, use the same weights, but it really is getting into that mindset of learning how to program for the long term. Because I look at it as, I don't want to give you a workout that you can do today. That's easy. I can get you out of breath in 5 minutes. That's no problem. But I want you on a long-term program for years, that when your schedule gets busy at work, you go, okay, I know today's not the day where I can go lift heavy, but I can go do a body weight workout. And I'm a huge fan of TRX. I've become friends with the owner of the company over the years. Randy Hetrick created a phenomenal product. And the TRX, in my mind, is one of the perfect products, because and I do this sometimes. I get busy during the day. Well, in the evening, if I haven't had my workout yet, I go for a walk around my neighborhood, and there's a park down the street from my house. I put my TRX in a backpack. I put a water bottle. I go for a walk around the neighborhood. I go down to the playground. No kids are there. They shouldn't be there at a certain time. But I'll go there at 7:30 at night, hook my TRX up to a piece of playground equipment, and get a 20-minute, 30-minute body weight workout.
There you go.
And it gives you that mindset of being able to plan for the future and think long term. That's one of the things I've spent a whole chapter in the book about how to integrate and how to look at doing those activities of looking at your week and saying, okay, these 2 days I know I'm gonna be really busy. What can I do and when can I do it on those 2 days? Whereas these other days I know I can make it to the gym or do my normal workout. That's what I want readers to walk away with, is understanding how to do a little something every day so that you can be fit in the long run.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the key takeaway there, is finding ways to make it fit your schedule. You know, everybody's exercise program is going to be different for each person's goals and their lifestyle, but it's finding ways to fit it into your lifestyle, into your schedule, choose things that you enjoy. And when you do that, you're going to have more long-term success. So,
and you said it, man, if people find the stuff they enjoy doing, do it, double down on it, and be open to trying new things. And I'll say this, and if you look at we might do different exercises. You might do more of one thing. I might do more of another. You know, that doesn't really matter. But our programs should look the same in the fact that we are doing something hard a couple of days a week, and then we're doing something easy the other days of the week. Because I think especially for younger people, and I made this mistake. I was severely overtrained for a while as a young trainer because I would kick my butt every day. I got to work hard every day. You know, you can get away with that when you're 25, 26. You can't get away with that when you're 45, 46.
Yep.
You know, it just doesn't. You got to respect the physiology, and Father Time is always gonna win in the end.
Exactly. Pete, this has been an awesome conversation. Before I get to my last question for you, where can people learn more about you? I know you have a website, you're on social. Floor's yours.
Oh, thank you, man. The website is Pete McCall Fitness. It's PeteMcCallFitness.com. My first book, Smarter Workouts. In Smarter Workouts, I teach people how to design exercise programs for mobility, for strength, and for metabolic conditioning. And if they go to my website and they sign up for my mailing list, I will send them a chapter from Smarter Workouts along with a body weight workout that they can do. And I try to, I'm getting better about blogging more. I've been a professional blogger for years for the American Council on Exercise and NASM. So I've been blogging for other people, but I'm now starting to get better about blogging, adding more to my blog. And then my podcast is the All About Fitness podcast. And actually right now I'm doing a series on aging where I've interviewed a couple researchers on aging. And then today I'm really excited. I'm posting an interview I did with 2 instructors based out of Manhattan who are still in their 60s. These instructors are in their 60s. They've been teaching for more than 30 years, and they still do it every day. And they still are just and so I try to alternate on the podcast. I try to alternate between the research on what the scientists are telling us, and I try to talk to the practical people about how do they apply it to extend their lifspan. And then Ageless Intensity is the book coming out in August, and that's already on pre-sale on Amazon. So my whole goal is to help people learn how to use exercise to enhance their quality of life.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Very cool. You got some exciting stuff that you are working on and you have upcoming this year. So good for you. My last question for you, Pete, is around the definition of health. I think everybody tends to have their own definition of health, what it means to them. And it's obviously it can be a generic term, but I like to ask my guests, what does health mean to you?
Yeah, I was thinking about that because there are different components to health, right? I mean, there's physical health, there's mental health, there are all kinds of things of health, and they go hand in hand. I think one of the things that I think we're learning over the last year is how important mental health can be, and how important it is to take care of the muscle between the ears, just as all the other muscles in the body. So to me, health is remaining active. It's remaining free from disease. It's remaining free from conflict, or it's learning how, I guess, to look at it another way. I talked about stress, and exercise is a stressor. All these things are stressors in our life. Health, to me, to answer the question this way, health will be learning how to manage the stressors in your life. Sometimes there's going to be physical stressors. Okay, we can manage that, what we do. Other times there might be emotional or mental stressors. Well, there's nothing wrong with, like when I was going through my divorce, I was seeing a therapist about every week for a while just to help me process the feelings and help me process that. And I've dealt with depression in the past, and to be able to do that and be able to say, okay, for whatever reason, I'm feeling a little wonky. I know what I need to do for my muscles when my muscles are feeling a little bit overtrained. I rest. Yep. Well, it's being able to look at all aspects of our health and say, hey, if there's something out there, if you need to talk to somebody or sort through something, that's one thing that I think we can do a better job of is reducing the stigma of mental health, because it all goes together, man. I mean, it's one thing you can be healthy physique wise, But
Right.
if you're not tuning that muscle between the ears, there's going to be no sense. It's kind of like putting in a bitchin' motor into the Corvette, but not putting on decent tires.
Yeah. So true.
It's not going to work the same. So health is looking holistically at the entire structure and trying
Yeah.
to just learn how to mitigate the stress and manage the stress that applies to the entire structure, so that way you can be able to use it for the long term.
Yeah. I love that answer. That's one of the big things I've taken away from all of the guests and the conversations that I've had on this podcast is how much everything is interconnected. And of course I have my, specific topics that I like to cover around longevity and aging optimally and, hormesis and a lot of things that we've been talking about today. But I'm learning that you can't have one without the other. You need your mental health in order to have your physical health. You need good sleep in order to eat better. You need to eat better in order to have good exercise. So they're all connected. So I appreciate that answer.
Well, no, and it's just you're spinning plates, right? We need to keep everything in motion, and we need to do a balanced amount of everything. And
Yep.
too much of any one stressor, and it goes back to the discussion with cannabis or alcohol or anything. Too much of any one stressor is not good for the body. There needs to be a
Exactly.
balance of stressors, whether it's emotional, mental, physical, whatever. You can balance. If you balance your stressors, you can maintain optimal health. But if one stressor for some reason gets out of alignment, well, it's going to affect the entire structure and affect the entire being, and that's just something to pay attention to.
Yep, exactly. Very good. Well, Pete, this has been a pleasure. I really appreciate your time. Looking forward to your book coming out. You said August, right?
Yep, August. Yep, coming out from
Very
Human
cool.
Kinetics as the publisher.
Awesome. That sounds great. Well, thanks so much, Pete. I appreciate it and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, and to your audience, thank you for taking the time to tune in and listen.
Absolutely. All right. Have a good one.
All right, man. Appreciate it.